Hello, and welcome to the Innovia Conversation. I'm Steve Waltz.
And I'm Jeff Progulski.
And today, Jeff, we have one of our rock star developers, Daniel Palmer.
Yeah.
Daniel, welcome.
Hey, folks.
Yeah, I heard Daniel was trying to get in on our intro sequence. Come on,
I
man.
know. I was so ready.
This is your first time. Settle down. And I'm just all kidding aside. We are happy to have you, Daniel. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
So Daniel's been here at Innovia. How long, Daniel? A little over a year now?
Almost 3 years at this point.
What?
It'll be 3 in February.
So
I don't think he's old enough to be here for 3 years. Do you, Steve?
I know, he looks like he's 22 years old. I mean, my gosh. So
Well, I'll take that as a compliment.
take it as a compliment. So Daniel, if you don't mind, maybe you can tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and how the journey brought you to Innovia.
Definitely. So I have been working as a computer programmer kind of personally and professionally for about almost 10 years now. Started with NAV Development out of college, graduated in 2016, and I've been working for Innovia almost ever since then. There was a little bit of time I spent kind of getting up to speed in NAV, and then I was just jumped right in. I'm working on the service and support team right now under Holly, taking care of break fixes, and my time's about, I would say, split pretty evenly between plan development and unexpected issues that pop up, things that kind of take you by surprise, fires to put out, things like that. So I do a pretty wide variety of development. I really enjoy having that variety. Every day is different. Don't really know what to necessarily expect coming in, which makes things pretty exciting. Personally, I live in Colorado. I love skiing, mountain biking, pretty much anything outside, hiking. Gonna try and take my dog up on some more hikes this year, and just being outside. I love anything to do with nature, and hope to continue living and adventuring in Colorado for quite some time.
Yeah, because Denver's a very fast and growing city, especially for the younger generation, I would say, and that's very cool. And so I know Daniel's uncle Joseph worked for us for a while and was a rocket scientist, right? And he said, "Yeah, Steve, Daniel's smarter than me." And I'm like, "Whoa!"
I don't know about that. He has a PhD in astrophysics or something. Maybe it's just physics, but yeah, I don't know about that. He's a pretty bright guy, but if he said that, I will take that and hold my head high.
I can't remember if he said that or if I made it up. Either way, take it as a compliment. So I'm pretty sure he did.
Steve, we're in sales. Everyone is assuming that you're making it up.
That's right. I can neither confirm nor deny that statement. But spoke very highly of you. And you're on the rescue squad, is what the name of the daily support team is, right?
Yep. We are the rescue squad, and we take pride in helping people out of tough situations. When someone calls and their world is crashing down, and from our perspective, it's you have to feel that kind of urgency, and you have to empathize with the pain that they're going through. So I think that's one thing that Holly has done a really good job of bringing to the team is that kind of we care about our customers, obviously, and we always have, but there's a sense of their emergency is our emergency that I think she's done a really good job of bringing to the team. And that's one thing I really enjoy is helping out the people we care about. So,
speaking with Holly, when she came over, I'm like, the support team, the support area is like the ER. Sometimes the ER is busy and sometimes not quite as busy, but it's usually got a lot going on. And, and we were kind of talking earlier about, how it can you think you got a planned day, and then all of a sudden you get a ticket or a call in like, I can't ship or I can't do this. And so maybe you can kind of like walk us through what a typical day on what you do is, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah. Let me walk you through kind of a couple things that happened this week, because there's not a typical day. So I've had one day this week where I've gotten to put my head down and crank out some development things that I had scheduled for the week. I can never book the week full because there's always something that's going to come in that I have to anticipate. But this week had a couple more of those issues than we typically do. So we had a customer with some credit card issues where their transactions were showing up as voided, where in fact they were approved. And obviously, when you get a transaction back that says voided, the user's first instinct is going to be run it again. So this customer ended up with multiple transactions against the same charge. So multiple transactions for the same purchase, essentially. So that's about as big of an emergency as I can imagine.
And that's one way of increasing revenue, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. So
we're that through 3 times.
Right. So, and at the time, so I started that day out. I did about 15 minutes of development work on something I had planned. I got pulled into a separate issue, not the credit card problem, but a pretty high priority shipping issue. And I was able to dig into that one for about an hour, and I was working with some of our application consultants on that. And then Holly shot me a message. And at this point, she had already figured out the cause of that credit card issue. They had essentially already gotten to the bottom of that. So that was Holly, and she's our team lead, but at the same time, she does quite a bit of work as an application consultant as well. And so she had figured this issue out, contacted me because they had all these records that had a status of void on them rather than approved, which is what they should be. So my role in that issue was coming in and doing the data cleanup, because she'd figured the problem out. This data was in their system, but it was wrong. So we had a specific set of records. So I wrote a quick processing only report, and the report was going to loop through these records and update them. And I went to run it, and it turned out that customer didn't actually have the report available. So I switched it over to a code unit, realized they didn't have the code unit available. So I ended up having to take that code and I snuck it into a page they had, and this was after hours, so it wouldn't have run a million times, but kind of had to be tricky about where I fit that code in to work around the customer's license constraints, and avoid using another object that they didn't have the rights to. So there was a little bit of workaround on that, but and sometimes you got to get creative to get around issues like that. So the actual cleanup was not that complicated in terms of the code I had to write, but it was a matter of just jumping through a couple of hoops to get those records corrected.
Awesome.
After that happened, I got to jump back and complete the first 15 minutes that I started in the day and wrap up that development project.
I've got a question, Daniel.
Sure.
Yeah, so what would you say, as like maybe as a percentage, how many tickets involve you as a developer? I mean, to me, it seems like most of the tickets that I'm familiar with from my customer is, like trouble posting or it's something that seems to lead more to an application consultant. Clearly, the example you just gave was of that. But I mean, how often are you involved in tickets as a developer?
That's a good question. The goal is that the application consultants can fix these issues through the role tailor client, through the front end of the application. There are obviously situations like what Holly ran into where she couldn't do that, and then she had to pull me in. So I would say the majority do not require my input, probably, or any developer's input. I would say maybe 60% of tickets that come in, potentially even more than that, the application consultant can fix the issue without pulling in my assistance on that.
Gotcha.
The number of tickets that are purely development is very small. Typically it'll come in and then the application consultant pulls me in if they need. There are rare cases where I'll be working, we have one customer with a developer who I work with pretty consistently. And I'll work directly one-on-one with him. But generally it's safer and more predictable to work through an application consultant and the customer rather than directly one-on-one with a developer and a customer.
Gotcha.
So a question I have, Daniel, is, I think most people know what a developer does that are listeners, and some know what an application consultant does. And, when I talk with customers or people that are interested in Innovia, they seem like in the past when they used to engage with their previous partner is that it would get sent just to a developer. And so maybe you can talk to us how you interact with your team when a ticket comes. Maybe they're thinking development and it's not, or vice versa. They're thinking maybe it's just an application consultant. So how do you interact and you guys determine all that?
Sure. So let me start out with an example of what happens in my experience when developers and customers work together long term without an application consultant to give them input. Is that you end up with as a developer, I thoroughly understand the code behind the NAV application, how these pieces fit together and work, but in terms of actually using the application from the front end or understanding every function that is in NAV, I don't have that knowledge. And so the application consultant might know, these are people who have worked professionally in very specific areas of NAV for long term and know those areas inside and out. And so a customer might make a request that already exists. There's base functionality for that. And I, as a developer, might not know that. And so if I'm working directly with the customer, my first instinct is I know how to make that happen. But if there's already code in the application to do that, I'm basically going to be recreating something that already exists, first of all. Second of all, Microsoft has built this code base, maintained it, and does a pretty darn good job of making sure there aren't issues in it. Their code is generally very, very reliable. So if there's code to do that already, it's not in your best interest to have a developer recreate that. So companies where a developer and we've had companies come to us who have been in situations with a partner where they've been working directly with a developer and the developer says, yeah, I can do that to every one of their requests, and does it. And they end up, we've had customers who almost have another program written within NAV, and it's all custom. And there's all these custom pieces that exist in base NAV. and it can really become a mess, to put it bluntly. So having an application consultant who can tell you when you should or when you should not, or when you do or do not need a modification, people who know NAV inside and out from the user's perspective, they're invaluable in maintaining your system long term, because they can really fix things, or tell you how to do things that are already in NAV. And when the developers come in and they don't get the whole story, because they've been talking directly with a customer who presumably understands the system thoroughly, but doesn't always. There's always aspects that none of us can understand every piece of it. So having that knowledge of the full application, coming from an application consultant, I think is just invaluable for keeping your code base tidy, really.
So do you guys meet daily, or how often do you guys talk about all that stuff?
Yeah, we meet every day. So we have a meeting every morning. We get together, we talk about successes we've had in the last couple of days, things that we've done well, kind of pat ourselves on the back, and Holly says, good job, hopefully. And then we talk about opportunities, and that is really the bread and butter of that meeting is who needs help from who, what kind of roadblocks do we have. And so in that meeting, we bounce issues off each other, ideas off each other. So if an application consultant says, this is my situation, this is an area of NAV that I personally don't have the most experience in, there's other people on the team who have, as a team, we have the full set of knowledge, but as individuals, we don't. So we work together to make sure that the tickets go to the right people. The people who are experts in that given area are working on the issue. We will give each other ideas, input on whether something does or does not require development, or maybe if there's a way to do it without developing. Because really the way we try and think, at least on our team, is that development should be a last resort. If you can do something through the application without modifying it, 9.9 times out of 10, that's the right course of action. And obviously, since 40-ish% of the tickets do require my input, we do come into a lot of situations where we do have to modify the base application, but that usually happens after we've exhausted other options.
Jeff, any questions that you have for our rock star?
Yeah, I do. So do you, in your development support role, do you work much with Business Central, or is it exclusively NAV that you work with?
It's a good question. It's mostly NAV that I'm working with. I do get a couple Business Central tickets a month. Typically, if we have an issue with an extension, it will typically go to the developer who created the extension, and most of the developers who created the extensions are on the project teams, which means that a lot of the support for those modifications goes back to the original developers who did it, rather than most of the, call them standard or pre-BC issues that come in. We handle them a little bit differently in terms of them going just straight to the support team.
Right. Which do you prefer working with? Do you have a preference? Do you like the old development world of NAV or the new Business Central one better?
That's a hard question because the new one is really exciting and it's shiny and it has, I mean, it's totally different. It's a totally different type of development. You have to change your mindset. So I really like working in Business Central for that reason. I mean, you're on the front end of development, for NAV. And that being said, I've been working in outside of BC a lot more than I've been working inside BC. So I'm definitely more comfortable with pre-BC development and things like that. But in terms of my general excitement levels when I get a ticket in, I think I would rather have a Business Central ticket.
Gotcha. All right, that's interesting. I've only got one more question. So Steve, if you have any more, jump in.
I'm waiting for you to ask your one question.
Oh, gotcha. All right. Well, I thought this seems like a very important question to a developer, but how many stickers do you have on your Surface?
How many stickers do I have on my Surface?
Assuming you have a Surface, not a laptop.
I have a laptop, and Jeff, they actually don't make you better at technology.
They don't? I'll start peeling mine off then.
I don't have a single sticker on my laptop, but I do have a sticker on my phone. So I think that counts, right?
Okay, yeah, that will count. I think that is the thing I notice most when I attend the Microsoft conferences, is that you can generally identify who is a developer based on the number of stickers on their.
That's my experience as well. Maybe I should get with the program there.
Oh, I don't know. I like it. You're kind of a rebel. I like that. An outlier.
That makes sense now, Jeff, because I had a couple stickers on my old laptop before it died, and I don't have any now. So when I go to meetings, people don't ask me questions anymore.
And actually, I have just a ton of stickers on mine, which isn't even to impersonate a developer. It's more because I've grown up a skateboarder, and skateboarders just, for some reason, I have an affinity to stickers. So I have a binder full of them. So
maybe
so
you have a sticker pack for me, Jeff.
Oh, I definitely. Next time we see each other, I will make sure I've got some.
Yeah, I'm kind of have an adversity to the stickers because when I was back in the day when I was in school, everybody got those nice stickers for good things. I got the stickers that said, have your mom or dad call me.
I thought, my experience with stickers growing up was getting in trouble with my parents because I'd stick if they were like the stickers that came in those packs of gum or whatever they were, and I would stick them on the back of my door and places where and then my parents would have to scrape them off and give me lectures about why I shouldn't do that. So might be bigger issues that we don't want to unpeel in this episode, though. So we can move on, Steve.
Well, let's move on. I only have a couple of questions that are really tough questions. Okay, not really tough questions. So I know, Daniel, we talked a while back, and when a lot of the younger developers that are going to school, a lot of them want to either create the next big video game, and then they get the reality that they work you as like slave labor, right, in that world.
Oh yeah, they sure do.
And that they're. I remember when I was in college. They teach you, I was more a business major, accounting and marketing and they would teach you about it, but they didn't really talk about the professions, right? You kind of had to figure that on your own. And I was just kind of wondering, when, since you're in your mid-20s, did you guys ever talk about, what opportunities are outside? Like, did you know anything? I know your uncle worked, with NAV. So besides him, did anyone ever talk about these are, a lot of these large companies run ERP systems. There's a for developers.
Right. Yes, we did discuss them, not specifically NAV, but ERP systems in general. But they really did do a good job of educating us on I mean, there are a million things you can do with a computer science degree, and I think it seemed to me like a lot of my peers came into it with the intention or the dream of getting into the video game industry, and that's kind of what Steve and I were discussing the last time around. And I worked with a game developer who was I was interning for him at the time, actually, and he kind of warned us all away from the video game industry, and I think he may have shattered a couple dreams when he did that, but yeah, I mean, there's just so many things you can do with a programming skill set, and it was hard for them to really go into detail on too many of the paths you could take, just because there were so many different options. But yeah, it was definitely ERP systems were definitely discussed pretty fairly frequently, and but that was just in the context of, this is one of the paths you can take, and there were a million, so I wouldn't say we went into a whole lot of detail on it.
No, but because you're in a good spot, because there's a shortage of over 40,000 developers in the United States alone. And another question I have for you is that, so we have some of our customers that listen, a lot of people that use NAV, and is there any advice, or what would you say to them, prior to either sending a support ticket in or engaging? Let's say maybe they're on another system, or they're looking at going from one system to NAV, or they're on a very old version, and they're trying to think forward on should I fix this? It's like that old car, right, that you kind of had forever. It's kind of part of you, and,
yeah.
Or go to the new model, I guess. Where would you point them to maybe do some research on, or how to go about thinking about that?
Yeah, so I have a couple pieces of advice, and the first is think about your upgrade before you think about your upgrade. And what I mean by that is, the more you modify your system, the harder it is to upgrade. And this, I'm talking specifically about pre-Business Central. When you get into Business Central and extensions, the extensions really facilitate those upgrades. But before that, the modifications to base nav, every modification you make has to be moved forward. Alternatively, you can re-implement and basically only bring forward the modifications you want. But that's, again, you're going to have somebody going through and reviewing each of those modifications individually and deciding whether they should come forward. So the more modification you do, the harder that upgrade is. And that kind of circles back to my previous point of do development when you have to. If you can get around it, if there's a way around development that is feasible, then I would encourage that route. The other piece of advice I have is Google your error messages. A lot of issues that come in, they're not necessarily something that our customers could not figure out. And I would always encourage everybody to, if you have the time, just Google the error message, see what pops up, see if it's something simple, maybe you could dig in and take care of it if you're comfortable with that. We're always happy to help, obviously, but we understand that you may be able to fix the issue yourself, and if that's the case, I want to empower our customers to be able to do those things. So I like giving feedback to customers. Let them know what the resolution was, things like that, so that maybe the next time it comes around, they have that knowledge to take care of the problem. Because that's really, that's my goal, and I think that should be our goal as partners, is to empower the customer, not make them dependent on us.
And you said extensions, so I think a lot of our listeners, because there's some fear of going from NAV to BC, and and maybe, when I talk with some of our customers, and Jeff does it more eloquently than I do, is, when they talk about extensions, you have events and extensions. And I always like to reference like your smartphone. Like let's say you have an iPhone, you have your iOS, right? That's like your ERP system. And then the apps that you have are kind of like your add-ons, right?
Right.
And
yep.
So you're creating a call to the extension and creating an event, and then it kind of works back and forth. So when you do upgrades in the future on Business Central, it's kind of like you're disconnecting those like apps, right? Like you're upgrading your iOS.
Exactly.
And you kind of update it. I mean, is that fair to say, or how would you?
Yeah, no, that is a good way to describe it, because the way we do it, when we create an event or an extension, there's a trigger that triggers our extension. Those triggers are at least the ones Microsoft puts out and labels as, and this is a little technical, but labels them as integration events or business events. They will guarantee that those will not change, and so we can write an extension and rely on that trigger not changing. And so that means when we take our extension and we put it into a newer version, we know that the Microsoft side that we are kind of integrating into, they haven't pulled the foundation out from under our feet, which, and that's not to say that every extension is going to work in a newer version. There are other changes to the code, but it makes it a lot more reliable moving forward, knowing that the Microsoft piece of that puzzle is very, very unlikely to change.
Well, thanks for that. And so, Jeff, about it was maybe over a month and a half ago, Daniel and I had the opportunity to attend the Denver user group meeting. And
nice.
So, some people think we just lock up developers in their room, like no windows, and just kind of like that little trap door at the bottom, like we just put a bottle of water and you close it, right? just keep working. So, but hey, we actually let them out every once in a while, right, Dan?
I know the user group was the first daylight I saw in a month.
And and Andrea runs that chapter, and they do a lot of technical things. And I was telling Jeff that's where I learned that they changed the name of Microsoft Flow to Power Automate. And, you kind of got to see, the Power Platform. But I think they have an event coming up, and speaking with Andrea, that you might be presenting in February.
Yes, I am.
So do you know what you're going to be talking about? Because they went a technical, so that X me out, Jeff.
I don't have any specifics put together yet, so I won't be able to talk about it today. But I will be speaking at that in February. But the details of yet are undetermined.
But it'll be more on the development side, obviously. Correct?
Yes, it will. Yeah, it will definitely be development focused. But as far as my specific topic, I have yet to determine that for sure.
Okay, and now that Jeff has moved from an account manager to a pre-sales engineer, right? Jeff, I think there's a better name for you for that. Chief. We'll have to think about that one, or maybe our listeners can add to that. So he's out of the account management team. I mean, he's on the account management team. But he's no longer account manager, and so I guess the question we like to ask is, who's your favorite account manager?
Who's my favorite account manager? And Jeff's out of the running.
He's out, or if you want to talk about your least favorite one, we won't talk about.
Oh, geez, I'm not gonna broach that subject.
Yeah, Jeff, the last conversation, and that came across pretty quick, Jeff.
Steve, I don't play favorites with the children. I'll be honest.
Good answer. So, but and when we putting kidding aside, and being on the account management team, what's really cool about the culture, like at Innovia, is that be able to engage with other members of the different teams, and Daniel's part of the rescue squad, and I was in healthcare for a long time, and the ER is just different than every other part of the hospital, because you get things coming in, you're like, what? How'd that happen?
Right. Yeah.
And then you got to fix it. And then guess what, Daniel? all right, you're done with that one. Now you got to clear your mindset, right? And for the next one. And it's like, it just keeps coming and coming.
Oh, yeah. And I love that kind of environment. Throughout college, I worked in restaurant kitchens. And I mean, it's definitely, from a development perspective, more stressful, or I guess more unpredictable than a lot of development roles, being a support developer. But it's hard to match the actual, stress levels that you get from, working in a 100 plus degree kitchen, having a chef screaming at you. It's a much different type of stress than I had been used to.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say definitely more stressful than some development positions, but I'm pretty well suited to it, and I definitely thrive in that environment. So
that's good to hear. We call it controlled
it.
chaos.
Exactly. That's the goal, right?
Because you might have developers listening that are working for a company. Because, I remember being in medical sales when I would go to hospitals. They're like, "Oh, Steve, I want to, tell me about your job. Like, I'm interested." They see the front end part of it, right?
Yeah.
they don't see the negotiating with the CEO of a hospital or a large system or everything that has to go behind the scenes. And it just takes a different, I don't know about skill set, but I think more of a personality, because when stuff's coming at you fast, like you said, you enjoy it, you thrive on it, it's a challenge. But some people are like, I like that structure a little bit more, right?
Right. And yeah, and it's really you have to force control on it. It can't, you can't let yourself get flustered or overwhelmed, because as soon as you go down that road, things can go south quick. So yeah, I would agree that it's a mentality.
So, but hey, Jeff, the last podcast we had, you were kind of worried about your Packers not making the playoffs, and they got a first round bye, and this is the Friday before they're playing Seattle, and Russell Wilson's coming home to Wisconsin, right? You okay?
I'm still, yeah. So considering that we were, when you think back to the Seattle San Francisco game, where Seattle ended the game like 4 inches short of a touchdown that would have put the Packers as the number 1 seed. We are very fortunate to be a number 2 seed. I still don't think we survived the weekend, but I want to thank the Minnesota Vikings, because I think we have a better shot at Seattle than we did at New Orleans. So not going to call myself optimistic. I'm just, but I'm happy that we got a number 2 seed, even if we go 0-1 in the playoffs. At least we're not Bears fans.
We like, being a Cub fan, we used to say, why did I do that to my kids? And hey, we finally won, right? And so we got that monkey off our back. But being a Bears fan, but at least we won one, right? And I had some Minnesota fans poking at me this week about the Bears. I just pointed at my right hand. My second finger said, "You know what that is?" I go, "That's how many rings that the Minnesota Vikings have for the Super Bowl." So obviously I had no ring on my finger, but sorry for all the Viking fans out there. We're just having a little fun, right? And I know being out there in Denver, I think Daniel, you said you're not a huge sports fan. But
yeah, a little bit here and there, but yeah, I grew up in Massachusetts originally, so I have a little bit of Boston stain in me, and yeah, I like the Denver teams, but mostly I enjoyed kind of going out and doing my own thing.
Well, great, Daniel. We thank you for joining us today. Do you have a Twitter handle or anything that you want to let people know besides
I don't have a Twitter handle. Maybe I should get a Twitter. I don't know. The more social media I have, the more time I put into it. So I'm trying to cut it out entirely.
Yeah, when you said that, I'm like, boy, you're in your 20s, you don't have a Twitter handle. Good for you, right?
So, it's a constant fight against all my peers who are trying to get me to create these things, Instagrams. And
well, once again, thank you for coming on. We appreciate your time, and for all our listeners out there, This is our second podcast of the year. We're looking forward to bringing more content and meeting more of our team members. We love showing off our rock stars that we have here at Innovia. So you can find us on our website at innovia.com. We're on Twitter. We're also on Facebook. And if you want to follow me at Twitter, I'm at WaltSteve on Twitter. And Jeff, have you got a Twitter account yet, or what's going on with that? I take that means no. So we're gonna say goodbye to everybody. And Jeff, you got the microphone to drop?
Oh, how about if I just do it a pretend Microsoft drop?
Just take it.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Daniel.
See you, folks.
See you next time.